Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
Melissa, I was thinking about self-forgiveness and
Good topic.
what I've noticed with people is that they have a really hard time forgiving themselves and they get really, really stuck on this. Like way after everyone else has forgiven them for, you know, like their dumb behavior, whatever they did or whatever they, you know, whatever ruckus they caused. They hold on to that for way longer than everyone else.
Yeah.
And it's like some form of like personal torment.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad to watch too.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to be that person. I've been that person many, many times, probably even in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So like I was thinking about like, why is it so much harder for us to forgive ourselves than it is for us to forgive other people?
And you know what else is funny? I think that's one side of the equation. You know what I think the other side of the equation is not recognizing that the reason we still feel bad about something is because we haven't even considered forgiving ourselves. Like we have a fight with somebody or whatever, and we either have decided to forgive someone else or decided we aren't going to, but we don't even realize that we're in that equation, that we need to also address our own forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like, so some people rail against forgiving themselves, and some people don't even realize that that's part of something that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
I had a longtime friend, and that like our relationship just like kind of went sideways. And then like years later, I remember him making some comment like about like how it's really hard for him to get over his past bad behavior. I was like, dude, I forgave you like years ago. I don't even remember that. And like, I can't even remember it. Right.
Yeah.
But he's still stuck on it.
Yeah.
To the point where it's like, it's just not ever going to go back to the way it was. Like, we're not ever going to be able to like have a relationship again. Cause it just,
right.
I mean, maybe someday. Right. But like, it's just years of, being stuck on not forgiving himself, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard to watch.
It changes people. I think it changes people actually, and it leaves all sorts of open wounds, which then prevent people from going on and being who they're meant to be in the next part of their lives.
Yeah. So I think self-forgiveness to me, there's big events, right?
Yeah.
There's really big events that are truly really hard to get over.
Yeah.
And take a lot of work. And there's other events that are like paper cuts, but like 1,000 paper cuts is super painful.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So
indeed,
this idea that like we're kind of like our own worst critic and we don't let ourselves off the hook is hard.
Yeah.
So I was Googling this. Right?
Yay. What did you find?
Well, I just like, because I was thinking about it, I was like, I wonder what other people are kind of like talking about with this idea of self-forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I'd say kind of like in this mental wellness conversation, that I even talk about with people at work, right? About balance and being in the moment and, triggers and those things, but I don't often talk about self-forgiveness with people, right? It's kind of like,
I don't think we do.
I mean, in your coaching, do you say like, okay, let's talk about self-forgiveness, right? Maybe you do.
Yeah, actually sometimes that I do, but even when the topic comes up, there's still resistance.
Yeah. So sometimes I like to just hit the internet to see if like what the general conversation is. So I came across an article that was 7 tips for practicing self-forgiveness.
Oh, ooh, yay.
You'll hop in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the first tip is to define forgiveness. Like, what does forgiveness mean to you? What does actually forgiving yourself look like for you?
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. What does it mean to you? So does the list give you, like, break it down further, like each one
I
of them?
read that. I didn't read that far. I just grabbed the list.
Oh, fine. Okay. All right. Well,
I thought you and I could break it down.
For sure. Of course we can. So what does that, so for me, what I instantly went to is what's the feeling behind it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. I was like, what does it feel like to forgive yourself? Like, well, even if you don't say yourself, what is the feeling of forgiveness? That's the first thing that I went to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, it's like, you have to me, I'd have a really heavy feeling until the forgiveness happens, and then everything just like becomes lighter.
Right. Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
Same. Almost like I almost want to say to almost to a euphoria. Like it can be, depends on what the topic is.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is what forgiveness means to you is the absence of a bad feeling.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. I'm down with that. I think that's part of it. And then I think the other part is like trying to identify what it feels like right after you've forgiven, like that, and being able to contrast those two things.
Yeah. Like the transition. Right. Number 2, acknowledge your feelings. Right.
Oh,
this is actually what we just kind of talked about. Right.
Yeah. Well, the first part to me is even like trying to figure out what they are.
Yeah.
Okay. Acknowledge is good, right? Because sometimes we don't want to. We just don't want to. Because we're ashamed or guilty or, we somehow
usually
make it wrong.
Right. So like actually back to the define one, now we're kind of like figuring it out, right? Like why do I need to forgive myself? Because I'm feeling ashamed of some behavior I did. I wish I hadn't done something. I wish I would have done something differently, right?
Yeah,
it's exactly. Like ruminating on like an action or a behavior.
Yeah.
And you just like criticizing yourself over and over, and not really making any progress. Through that.
Yeah.
Right?
And then you know what happens at that stage? We start making excuses about why it feels terrible.
Yeah.
Well, if they would have just been this, then I would have never done that.
Yeah, like blaming other people.
Yeah. Or well, I don't really feel like that. I'm just this, or I'm just sick of how it's been, or I'm just, right? So that's, I think, what usually happens. We don't acknowledge the real feeling. We acknowledge the secondary feelings that come up from our feeling of shame over the first feeling.
Yep.
Which is the self-awareness journey.
So, right, acknowledge your feelings. Like actually get to what those feelings are and say, yep, I'm totally feeling ashamed of my behavior.
Yeah, I know it. Isn't that funny how we don't want to do that at all? It's not like we're putting it out on a billboard. Nobody even knows.
No, right?
It's like, no one knows that we're doing this. We're so funny.
It's like a t-shirt, like, I'm an asshole t-shirt. Number 3, acknowledge what you did. Right? You were kind of into that one. We're into that a little bit, like, because like the easy thing is just blame other people. Like, no, I mean, right? You can say like, well, I was a jerk in that meeting, but I was, this or that provoked me, right?
Yeah.
Or,
you know what? I'm going to introduce something that could be unpopular here.
Okay.
There's a lot of times in relationships that are not good for us, or relationships that we've outgrown, when people blame the other person, even in abusive relationships, not just physical, but like mental abuse or relationships that are not even, right? It is very typical for people that were in the subordinate part of that relationship or the victim part of that relationship to 100% blame the other person and acknowledge all the things that they did wrong. And when they talk about it with other people, they explain what a jerk that person was. They do all these things, setting that other person up for the complete failure of the relationship. And very seldom, even in a victim relationship, do people say, what part of this is mine?
Yeah.
And I think that is extremely critical, even in situations where it doesn't make sense. What does this have to do with me is a really important question. And that's something that I talk with my coach a lot about. Is like, what does this have to do? What part of this has to do with me? Because even in a victim style, and that's the unpopular part, there is some level of responsibility for staying or being in that situation, in that you left, it was great, whatever ended up happening, but you still need to forgive yourself and own the part that kept you there as long as it did.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard for people to do that. It's so much easier just to
I've
set
heard
it up.
that before.
Yeah.
Right? This idea that like you don't in a bad relationship like that, you still the victim person like still played the part. Yeah.
And you see people in the workplace have huge victim status. So, I mean, it doesn't even have to be like a big, really huge example of abuse. It could simply be a bad work environment. It could be a relationship with a boss that's not great. It could be with a peer that treats you like crap or tries to take, tries to take over what you've done or take credit for things that you've done, and you don't have a voice over that. And then it becomes very easy to say, I left that job because these people did this, or the culture was this.
Yep.
So
acknowledging what you did is a key part of
I think that's
self-forgiveness, right?
For sure. Yep.
Next, apologize. Right? When you stick your foot in your mouth and then you realize it, then you should just apologize. That sounds super simple, but I can tell you that's kind of hard to do because you kind of have to swallow your pride a little bit,
Yeah. You know what? There is nothing worse than you can wreck a good apology. I see people wreck apologies all the time.
In what way?
Well, when you are making those like overtures, authentic overtures to say you're sorry, just apologize and don't try to pack it with anything else.
And just move on, right?
Well, I did this because, where there's a justification or a and or a but. I'm sorry, but every time you do this, it makes me mad. Yeah. That completely negates the entire apology. So it's the pure apology that is what we're looking for, I think, in this step.
Yep.
Well, at least I'm assuming that. I've never seen the list. So that's what that person meant when they wrote this list.
Just using the titles of this list to make our own conversation. Yeah, when I think of apologizing, right? Apologizing to someone else, it is like, sometimes you kind of dread it, right? Like you don't want to go do that. Yeah. But after it helps you get through the process, right?
Totally.
And if you never apologize, and then you carry that guilt and shame around with you for like years on end,
right? Then
you can't ever get to self-forgiveness, right?
Right. Yes.
The apology is part of the process. And if you skip it, then you're going to get stuck there. Yeah,
you're skipping the most important part.
Right. Next, focus on what you learned.
That's so funny. We were just talking about this a little while ago on a different topic, weren't we? It's like, well, I think you and I do that a lot, don't you? It's like try to talk about, okay, well, this experience happened and what did we learn about it? And I think apologies and forgiveness are in that same vein. It's like, what did you learn? So it's like the self-reflection part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's like, even like I'd say probably like all aspects of my life. Like for me, it's all around what you learned, right? Like even for work stuff, my mentality is like fail fast, fail often. It's because like the faster we screw up, the faster we can learn from like the things that don't work. And there does seem to be like a lot of pressure, especially like in social contexts, to be perfect, to not screw up. Right. But screwing up's okay, as long as you can learn from it, right? As long as you can apologize, you can learn from it, and you can move on. Then to me, like it's okay. But it's hard to sometimes reflect and learn, right?
Well, particularly, I think this is, like this is a great perfect list. Again, theory and talking about something so much easier than the actual living of it. But I think when we get to this stage is, when what did we learn? I think that's a really easy trap, because a lot of the times the things that we want to forgive ourselves for are the repetitive things that we do all the time that we just get so mad at ourselves that we can't stop doing. Whether it be getting in the last word, or whether it be having a bad habit that we're having a hard time leaving. And then we end up falling from grace, and we end up, again doing it, or again saying it, or again being it. And it's like, what do you mean? What did I learn? Like, I think sometimes it's really hard to do that. Take your inventory.
It is. And when you say like a bad habit, what I thought of is like that script that people play in their head so many times. It's like, why do I always?
Exactly.
Right? Why do I always XYZ, right? And when you're in that why do I always mode, it is hard to find the lesson in that.
Because we're in shame. We're really shaming ourselves at that time.
Yep. And there again, you've kind of stopped this self-forgiveness process right there. Probably really the easiest way to focus on what you've learned is get a podcast and talk about it.
Yeah, that works really well. But you have to be with someone that you trust. You don't want to be with like a sibling that's coming out after for you and they're like, oh yeah, you always do that. You are such a jerk about that. That probably wouldn't be very helpful.
But sometimes like having a thinking partner, that you trust, that you feel safe with, to help you figure out maybe what you learned, in order to help you like release and forgive yourself is really helpful.
And I think that it's really important that you choose people that are going to +1 you, as you and I say. You trust that someone that you really trust to be emotionally intelligent and observational, even if they're a close friend. So that the information that they're giving you helps you and doesn't hinder your ability to let something go and forgive yourself.
And they don't like get sucked into the shame spiral. Okay, next, make meaningful changes.
What do you think about that?
That's good and hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like how many times it's like, oh God, I just like stuck my foot in my mouth again. Like it just like, but to me, like you always describe it so well as like describing a lot of the stuff is like they're waves, right? And you're just trying to make the waves less intense every time around. And that's what I always think about is like, okay, I'm gonna stick my foot in my mouth again, but what I can do is recognize it sooner, apologize faster. Maybe when I kind of sense that I'm kind of getting into a mood where I might say something really dumb,
right?
Slowing down, right? Just making these small changes that actually do over time affect my behavior in like the way that I want.
So there's this really cool thing that I've used in coaching over the years, and it's the Benjamin Franklin habit changing process. So this would be something that might be really interesting at this stage when you're trying to make a meaningful change, but you really don't know how or when or what does it feel like. And it's a 3-step process. And essentially, I won't go through all of it in extreme specificity, but generally it is a 6-week program where the first couple of weeks, when you do something that is, again, that habit that you don't want to do and you want to have that change, the first 2 weeks, just notice when you do it. Don't judge yourself. Don't try to change it. Don't do anything. Just notice. And you can even like put it on your phone as a little hash mark. And so you keep kind of a running tally. Oh, there, I just thought that way again. Oh, I just did that again. Oh, there, I said that same thing again. There, I said it again. So just kind of collect that. And then the second stage of that is to, right after you've done it. So you notice it again because you've been making you're trying to change the habit and you've been noticing it with these little hash marks. This next stage is, as soon as you notice it, after you've done it, say out loud, oh, I just got through doing this again and I'm going to work on changing this to this new way. So you actually verbalize. And then the third stage is you'll notice it coming up, and before you do it, you actually divert your attention or divert your action into the new action. And you can do it. It's funny, like some people, even if you think that that's a little harder, it's pretty simple actually when it's a very concrete, simple thing. Like every time I catch myself saying, I'm not, why does this always happen to me? Like every time I hear the same thought, that's going to be what I use as a tick mark. You can even like have a piece of jewelry, or you can wear a rubber band on a wrist or something. And every time you notice that you're doing it, take the rubber band off one wrist and put it on the other one. That physical action helps you retrain your thinking pattern. Yeah. And that might be something that people want to try in this stage.
So a thing that I will do, especially like, in the context of like working with other people, is that I will like, when I kind of sense that I might just be on a track where I might like not be speaking as eloquently as I'd like to, I actually like pause for a second and just like reset my intention. Right. Because, the change kind of like I've made is to say, okay, I got to stop for a second, reset my intention for what I actually want here. So I don't say something stupid or that I will regret later, or that was just not like really what I wanted. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like a way for me to become more thoughtful about
that's interesting.
Like my words and my behaviors.
Yeah.
So, but it starts with like an intention. Yeah.
So you're just saying literally take a pause in the moment, even if it's a pause that doesn't make sense or it's in a weird spot, it doesn't matter. It just gives you that little microsecond to switch something up.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Okay. Last one. Number 7.
Yeah.
Practice compassion.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So when we talk about compassion, when people say it, like, you should be more compassionate, you should be compassionate, you should practice compassion.
Yeah.
It's often applied to other people, right?
Yes, 100%.
Like give other people grace, be compassionate, like everyone has their own story, all that, right? But applying compassion to yourself in the process of forgiving yourself is really key. And we forget to be gentler on ourselves.
Right. If you look in the mirror and you say out loud some of the things that you think about yourself, you would never, ever say those to anybody else.
Never. Right.
Yeah. And I will even go a step further in this with being compassionate is you can't be authentically compassionate for others 100% unless you are compassionate with yourself. And that's the falseness of, not believing in yourself the way that you are trying to say that you believe in others. When people say, oh, I just really want to help others, you are not able to help others unless you help yourself first. There's something in that that's false. There's something in that that's not complete. And so
I agree. It's you see it all the time where
I know.
It's like you have to take care of yourself before you're capable of taking care of others. And compassion goes right in there. You have to have compassion for yourself before you're truly compassionate for others.
You know what I've learned? You know, I've given myself so much practice at forgiving myself.
I was going to say, like, I have so much practice giving myself a hard time.
Yes. And forgiving myself, which I'm getting much better at. But I'll tell you something, the whole rest of the world looks kinder and gentler the way I look at myself now. The whole rest of the world, even people that are in opposite political parties, in situations that I just like make my eyes get big. I have compassion and empathy in those situations as well. And I think it's due to the fact that I've been doing so much work to have compassion for myself. And it really, really works. And it feels so good when we do it.
Yep. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Being harsh on yourself, judging yourself.
Judgment,
puts out judgment, makes you feel like everyone else is doing the same thing.
Precisely.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you change that feeling inside, that narrative to a more compassionate one, then you're right. The whole world feels much more compassionate.
Better. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Great conversation.
That was a fun list. I like doing list. I like doing list podcasts.
Yeah, I do too. They're kind of fun. I do too. The Google.
So I don't know. Do you have any super wise parting words about self-forgiveness?
No, I think this has been a really good conversation, and I think it is at the forefront of all of the work that we do. We can't do any of this other work unless the forgiveness piece is high and mighty in the front.
I agree.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.